This is a painful story of a mother. A widow who gave everything she had to her children. She worked day and night, sold her pride, and carried burdens no one ever saw. But in the end, the same children she suffered for, forgot her when she needed them the most. Before I continue, my dear friends, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button, like, and share this video with your loved ones. Your support means the world to me. Thank you so much. In a quiet corner of Nigeria, in a peaceful village, lived a woman named Amanda. Amanda was a magician with hair. In her little salon under a corrugated iron roof, her hands could twist, braid, and weave beauty into every strand. Each style seemed to tell a story, full of life and care. People didn't just come for their hair, they came for Amanda's laughter, her gentle presence, and the way she made everyone feel a little lighter. And there was Andrew, her rock. My Andrew wasn't a big city businessman, no. He ran a little stall in the village market, selling everyday things, and God truly blessed his small enterprise. We weren't rich, but we had the kind of wealth that money can't buy: peace, love, and our two beautiful children. First, there was Jonathan, our bright, lively boy, always full of questions. And then came Bella, our little princess, whose laughter sounded like tiny bells. They were the center of our universe, and we were truly, deeply happy. I remember those evenings so clearly. Andrew and I would stand together, leaning against the sturdy trunk of the old mango tree just outside our compound. The children would be running around, chasing each other, their shadows stretching long as the sun began to dip. It was in one of those perfect moments, with the smell of wood smoke and evening air around us, that Andrew would squeeze my hand and say, "My lovely wife, I will try my best to guide these children. I will tell them everything they need to know, so in the future, they will make us proud." And every single time, I would look up at the sky and whisper, "Amen, my dear." Life has a funny way of blindsiding you, doesn't it? One moment you're standing under a mango tree, planning a future full of joy, and the next, everything changes. It happened on a Monday evening. A Monday that started like any other, but ended with a gaping hole in my soul. Andrew came back from the market. I heard his footsteps, but they lacked their usual confident stride. When he walked through the door, my heart just sank. He looked so weak, so utterly drained. I rushed to him. "My lovely husband, are you okay? What is it?" He just offered a tired smile and said, "Yes, my dear, I'm fine. Just very, very tired." I begged him to go and have a cool bath to wash away the day's stress. After he came out, I quickly prepared his favorite meal, a big, steaming bowl of pounded yam and vegetable soup. But I noticed he only picked at it. He ate so little. "My lovely husband," I urged, "please eat more. Let me just rest a little, Amanda," he said, his voice a whisper. He lay down on the woven mat in the living room, and before I could even get him a proper pillow, he was asleep. The children, Jonathan and Bella, were already tucked in and dreaming by about 8:30 p.m. The house was quiet, save for the chirping of crickets outside. I went to wake Andrew, to gently nudge him to go and sleep inside on the bed, where he'd be more comfortable. "Andrew, my love, come inside," I whispered. He didn't move. I called his name again, a little louder this time. "Andrew." Silence. Panic is a cold, sharp thing. It grips your throat and makes your heart beat like a trapped bird. I shook him, hard. Andrew, stop playing. Wake up. He didn't answer me. That's when I screamed. I shouted his name and cried out for my neighbors, a sound that tore itself from my very core. The sound of a life shattering. Within minutes, people were pouring into my compound. Mrs. Elizabeth, our closest neighbor, and Mr. Samuel, the village elder. They surrounded us, murmuring in low, worried tones. I was hysterical, clinging to Andrew's lifeless body, trying to breathe life back into him. It was Mr. Samuel who finally held me, pulling me gently but firmly away from Andrew. He held my face in his hands, his eyes full of pain for me, and he spoke the words that I still hear sometimes in my nightmares. Amanda, be strong. Andrew is gone. I remember the floor rushing up to meet me. I remember the sound of my own voice, raw and broken, fading into a dull roar. I fainted right there, the earth swallowing my tears. Andrew, my beloved husband, the man who wanted our children to make us proud, was gone. Just like that, the light of our home was extinguished. The funeral was a blur of black cloth, sympathetic faces, and the hollow emptiness where my husband used to stand. But even in my deepest grief, I had two little faces looking up at me, Jonathan and Bella. They were the reason I had to find a way to stand up again. They were Andrew's legacy, and my absolute reason for living. In our culture, when a man passes, it is sometimes customary for the widow to be taken in marriage by another relative, or even another man from the community. Not always for love, but for protection and provision. After the dust settled and the final prayers were said, the men began to come. They came to pay their respects, yes, but they also came with an intention to marry me. They saw a hard-working woman, a good mother, and perhaps they also saw an opportunity. But every single man who came to my door brought with him the same, heartbreaking condition. They would marry me, they would take care of me, but I had to leave Jonathan and Bella behind. They said, Amanda, your children are a burden. They are not our blood. We will have our own children with you. The first time I heard it, I felt a deep, fiery anger boil up inside me. How dare they? These children were not a burden, they were my treasures. The very reason I wanted to be married again was so I could better provide for them. So I could get them the love, protection, and opportunity that Andrew had promised them. I looked at the men, one after the other, and with a strength that must have come from Andrew's spirit, I gave them the same answer. No, I will not trade my children for a husband. My children are my life. If you cannot accept them, then you do not accept me. One by one, they all refused. They walked away, shaking their heads, calling me foolish. But as the door closed behind each one, I felt a surge of pride. I had chosen my children. I had chosen Andrew's memory. And from that moment on, I knew I was truly alone, but also stronger than I had ever been. It was me and my two little soldiers against the world. Being a single mother in the village is not easy. Being a widow is even harder. Suddenly, everything, the bills, the school fees, the food, the hope, it all fell squarely on my shoulders. I carried a weight I never thought I could bear. I worked. Oh, how I worked. I would wake up before the sun, sweeping people's compounds for a few coins. I would spend hours at the river, washing massive piles of laundry for the wealthier families in the next village. My hands were always rough, always stained, but I didn't stop. I poured all my energy into my hairdressing business, staying open until the last lantern flickered out. But despite my tireless efforts, sometimes it just wasn't enough. There were times when the school fees were due, and I had nothing left. I would sit by myself, watching my children study by the light of a kerosene lamp, their little heads bent over their books, and I knew I couldn't let them down. They were so bright, so hungry for knowledge. So, I would do the unthinkable. I would go to the cupboard, take out my most beautiful wrapper, the colorful, expensive cloths Andrew had bought me for special occasions. These were my treasures, the last tangible link to the love we shared. I would fold them neatly and take them to the market to sell. I would always manage to get just enough money for their tuition. My children, Jonathan and Bella, were brilliant. They were always at the top of their class. I truly believed that God heard my desperate prayers in those moments. I prayed not for money, but for strength, for focus for my children, and for a miracle. And seeing their report cards, seeing their determination, made all the pain, all the sacrifice, worth it. Everyone in the village knew my story. They saw my struggle, and they saw my fierce love. They respected me. And I was proud. I held on to the hope that one day, one beautiful day, things would be better. When you're going through deep suffering, sometimes the only thing that keeps you going is faith. And I had faith. I had nothing else but my children, my hands, and the God of the widow. I called him that, because it felt like he was the only one who truly saw my struggle. I was praying for a chance, a breakthrough. I didn't want ease. I wanted an opportunity for my children, something that would match their incredible intelligence. I needed a bridge to take them far away from the dirt floors and the constant anxiety over school fees. And finally, God answered. It was one ordinary Tuesday. Jonathan, who was just graduating from secondary school, came running home, waving a piece of paper like it was a winning lottery ticket. His eyes were wide and shining. "Mummy, Mummy, look." It was a letter. A big, official letter. Both Jonathan and Bella, who was 2 years behind him but already catching up, had been granted full scholarships to study abroad. Not just abroad, but to prestigious universities in a country full of opportunity. I sank onto the wooden bench, clutching the letter to my chest. It wasn't just a scholarship, it was a miracle. It was the fruit of every single wrapper I had sold, every floor I had swept, every midnight prayer I had whispered. It was the promise Andrew had made to me under the mango tree, finally coming to pass. I cried, but these were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. I looked up to the sky, thanking the God of the widow. My children were leaving the village. They were going to fulfill their destinies. The village celebrated with us. Everyone who had watched me struggle, who had seen my hard work, felt a piece of that joy. They knew how much it meant. The day Jonathan and Bella left, it felt like the entire community was at the bus station. I remember standing there, holding them tight, trying to memorize the feel of their clothes and the smell of their hair. Jonathan, my serious boy, hugged me fiercely. "Mummy, please don't worry. I will work hard. When I finish my school, I will be working, and I will make you so proud. I promise I will bring you to live with me." Bella, my sweet girl, was teary-eyed but determined. "We won't forget you, Mummy. We will be back to take care of you." I watched them board the vehicle that would take them to the big city, and then to the plane. As the bus pulled away, I kept my hand raised, waving until I could no longer see even the dust it kicked up. A part of me went with them, but I was happy. I was lighter. My mission was accomplished. The house felt very quiet after that. The silence was deafening where their laughter used to be. But the sadness was mixed with deep contentment. I had survived the worst, and now, my children were thriving. The first few years were golden. They called almost every week. The time difference made the calls short, usually late at night for me, but hearing their voices was everything. Jonathan would call and update me on his engineering course. He would talk about the huge library and the cold weather. He always ended the call with, "Mummy, don't worry. Just focus on your shop. We are fine. Soon, very soon, things will change for you." Bella would call too, bubbling with excitement about her studies in business. She loved telling me about the different kinds of people she met. When the calls didn't come through, I had my rituals. Every single night, before I went to sleep, I would take out their small, slightly faded pictures. I had one of Jonathan from his graduation and one of Bella on her 15th birthday. I would hold those pictures tightly and I would pray. I prayed for their health. I prayed for their protection. I prayed that they would find favor in that strange, far-off land. And most importantly, I prayed that God would keep them grounded, that they would never forget the red dust and the sacrifices that got them there. It was a beautiful ritual. Those pictures and those nightly prayers were the balm that soothed my lonely heart. For a few years, the distance was a small price to pay for their success. Then, as the years passed, things began to change. The calls became less frequent. First, it was once a week, then once every 2 weeks. Soon, the calls were just once a month, and eventually, the only way I could talk to them was if I called them. If I managed to reach Jonathan, the call would be rushed. "Hello, Mummy. I'm late for a lecture. Talk soon." When I called Bella, my beautiful daughter, she started giving me excuses that sliced through my heart like a dull knife. "Mummy, we are too busy for work now. The office is demanding. We have deadlines." I remember one conversation particularly well. I called her on a Sunday morning, hoping for a long chat. "Bella, my darling, why is it so difficult to hear your voice? I miss you so much." Sound of impatience that hurt more than any shouting. "Mummy, I told you, we are working. We have built a life here. We can't just stop everything for a chat. We are very busy." Busy, I thought. Busy for me, your mother. The woman who sold her last wrapper so you could sit in that university lecture hall. I would hang up the phone, and the tears would flow freely. I would sit there and remember Andrew's words, "So in the future they will make us proud." They were making me proud with their careers, yes, but they were slowly breaking my heart with their absence. The sadness became a physical ache. Christmas in our village is a time for family, for homecoming, for laughter and feasting. I kept hoping, foolishly perhaps, that they would surprise me. I decided to prepare for them anyway. Maybe if I showed faith, they would come. I went to the market and spent the little money I had saved to buy a big, live chicken. Not for myself, but for the day my children walked through that door. Every time I heard the distinct sound of a motor vehicle struggling up the rough village road, especially a fancy, new one that might belong to successful people, I would drop everything. I'd rush out of my compound, straining my eyes, my heart pounding with hope, thinking, this is it. They are finally home. But the car would pass, carrying strangers, or it would be a rickety old transport vehicle. And I would go back inside, the big chicken clucking mournfully in the corner. People in the village noticed. My neighbors began to ask me, Amanda, are your children not coming for Christmas? What is the problem? I would put on a brave smile, a mask to hide the fear. No problem at all. I love my children, and I know they love me. They are just very busy, getting ready for their big careers. I will keep praying and I will wait for the day they will come home. I spoke those words with confidence, but at night, when the village was asleep, and the pictures were in my hand, I would cry until my eyes were swollen. I remembered every single sacrifice, every piece of clothing I sold, and the thought that they might be forgetting all of it, all of me, was a burden too heavy to bear. The human heart is a resilient thing, but it's not made of stone. All that pain, all that thinking, all that worry about the money and the silence from my children, it was accumulating. It was like carrying a giant sack of rocks every single day. When I remembered how Andrew and I struggled and raised them, how I worked myself to the bone, how I denied myself everything just so they could have a future, the memories weren't sweet anymore. They were heavy. They weren't memories of love, they were memories of effort wasted. I started to get headaches that felt like hammers pounding inside my skull. I couldn't focus on my hairdressing anymore. I would stare blankly at my client's hair, forgetting which braid I was supposed to weave next. The energy that had once driven me to sweep 5 compounds before dawn was just gone. I tried to push through it. I kept telling myself, Amanda, you are strong. You are Andrew's wife. You raised brilliant children. You cannot give up now. But the sadness was winning. The joy of their success was so far away, and the weight of their absence was right here, crushing me. My heart was too heavy. It felt like an actual, physical thing, a heavy stone lodged in my chest, making it difficult to breathe. I was slowly getting sick, and I didn't even realize it was my body finally giving up after years of fighting. The real sickness crept up on me like a thief in the night. It started with general weakness, a tiredness that sleep wouldn't cure. Then came the fever and the pains in my joints. I couldn't stand the heat of the cooking fire anymore. I couldn't even manage the small walk to my salon. I became bedridden. For 2 weeks, the church members didn't see me. 2 weeks without my usual presence in the choir, 2 weeks without my offering in the basket. In a village like ours, that's a very long time for a person like me to be missing. It was Mrs. Elizabeth, God bless her soul, who finally raised the alarm. She gathered a few other church sisters and they came to my compound to see why I hadn't been to service. They found me lying on my woven mat, exactly where Andrew had taken his last breath, only now, I was the one lying there, weak and barely able to speak. My skin was pale, my eyes sunken. I looked like a ghost of the strong woman they knew. The sight shocked them. They didn't waste a moment. They lifted me gently, wrapped me in a light cloth, and carried me to the small village clinic. The village clinic was really just a dispensary run by a kind but inexperienced nurse. She did her best, giving me some malaria tablets and trying to cool my fever, but my condition was worsening rapidly. The nurse, whose name was Sarah, finally realized the severity of the situation. My sickness was beyond the small resources of the clinic. She called the village pastor, Reverend David. She explained the situation to him. Reverend, Amanda's condition is getting too serious. The fever isn't breaking, and she needs specialist care. We can't handle it here. It's better she goes to the big hospital in the town. Reverend David announced it in the evening prayer meeting. The news spread like wildfire. Everyone in the village remembered Amanda's hard work, her sacrifice, and her unfailing faith. They knew she deserved better than to fade away in a small clinic. Immediately, people started bringing what little they had. Market women gave up their small savings. Farmers contributed coins hidden in their wrappers. Neighbors brought handfuls of cash wrapped in old notes. It was a community outpouring of love, a testament to the respect I had earned. They were collecting transport money and a deposit for the town hospital. I heard the sympathetic whispers, the rustle of clothes as people pressed cash into the Reverend's hand. I heard the sounds of the children playing outside, children whose parents were taking care of me now. And what hurt the most, what made the tears sting my eyes even in my sickened state, was the bitter irony. All these villagers, who had very little, were pooling their resources to save my life. They were my true family now. Yet, my own children, my successful, educated, working children, the ones I had nearly killed myself to put through school, were nowhere to be found. I asked Mrs. Elizabeth to call them again, just to tell them I was in the hospital. I needed to hear their voices. I needed to know they knew. When she finally got through to Jonathan, he was distant. When she explained the seriousness of the situation, he mumbled something about being busy, about the high cost of plane tickets. Bella picked up the phone later that night. She was even colder. She spoke about the cost of living and how they couldn't just drop everything. Even on my sickbed, where every breath was a struggle, my children's success meant they had an excuse not to come home. Finally, I got a chance to speak to them directly, my voice barely a croak. It took all the strength I had left. Jonathan, Bella, I am very sick, I whispered into the receiver. It was Bella who answered, her voice sounding crisp and professional, like she was talking to a client, not her dying mother. Mummy, we really wish we could, but we can't come to the village right now, she said. Then came the words that absolutely gutted everyone listening in the small clinic ward. Bella started complaining. The village is terrible, Mummy. There is no electricity for us to work on our laptops. The roads are terrible. Our nice car will break down. And we cannot get 2 weeks off work just for this. No electricity. Terrible roads. Those were the reasons they refused to come home and see their mother one last time. The hospital room fell silent. Everyone, the nurse, the Reverend, Mrs. Elizabeth, was stunned. They refused to come home. The place that forged them, the home that saved them, was now beneath them. The children of the humble, hard-working Andrew and Amanda were too good for their home. I knew then it was over. Not just my life, but the beautiful dream I had carried since Andrew died. After Bella hung up, the atmosphere in that little hospital ward changed completely. The warmth of the community effort seemed to chill. Everyone was looking at me, pity mixed with disbelief. I closed my eyes, accepting the defeat. The fever raged, and I knew I didn't have much time left. Suddenly, a massive wave of clarity washed over me. I wasn't Amanda the sick widow anymore. I was Amanda the mother, demanding one last chance to be heard. I opened my eyes and looked at the faces surrounding my bed. Reverend David, Mrs. Elizabeth, Nurse Sarah, they were all there. I gathered every last shred of air and strength I possessed, and I pushed it out in a harsh, desperate cry. My voice was broken, but the emotion behind it was raw and undeniable. "People, please," I choked out, tears streaming down my temples and wetting the pillow. "Please, help me tell my children that I love them." That was my final plea. Not a prayer for healing, not a request for forgiveness, but a simple, profound message of a mother's unending love for the children who had rejected her. The nurse leaned in, trying to comfort me, but it was too late. I cried out that one last message, the ultimate sacrifice of my heart, and then, the world faded to black. I had breathed my last. More suffocating than the fever had been. It was the silence of shock, of outrage, and of profound sorrow. Amanda was gone. The woman who had fought mountains for her children had finally been defeated, not by sickness, but by loneliness. Nurse Sarah quickly covered my face with a sheet, her own hands trembling. Reverend David looked towards the ceiling, his eyes closed, shaking his head slowly in despair. The sheer cruelty of the children's last words, the complaints about the roads and the electricity, echoed in that small, sterile room. It was what shocked everyone to their core. That a mother could suffer so much, and her successful children could refuse a final goodbye over a small discomfort. The villagers who had brought money, who had hoped and prayed, now simply wept. They didn't just mourn the loss of a good woman, they mourned the loss of the beautiful, powerful bond between a parent and a child. News of my death, and the devastating circumstances surrounding it, traveled faster than any gossip. It spread through the market stalls, across the fields, and into the compounds. The entire village cried. They cried because they loved Amanda. They cried because they respected the woman who had worked so tirelessly. But most of all, they cried because of the absolute heartbreak of it all. It was an insult to motherhood. It was a tragedy that made no sense. The children of the village, the friends of Jonathan and Bella, heard the story. They looked at their own mothers and fathers with fresh eyes, realizing the immense privilege of a warm bed and a full belly, privileges that only existed because their parents were there. The elders gathered under the giant mango tree, the same tree where Andrew and I had once dreamed of our children's future. They discussed what to do about the burial. Who would pay? Who would notify the children who were too busy for their mother? The funeral was over, but the truth refused to rest. This story demanded a voice. The loudest voice. King Emeka, ruler of the village, stood tall on the raised platform. His robes shone, his eyes burned with sorrow and anger. "Hear me," he bellowed. "Today we mourn Amanda, a woman who carried 2 lives on her shoulders. A woman who became a mountain of sacrifice. And what did the stars return to her? Silence. Excuses. Lies. When she called them home, they said, no power. Bad roads." The king slammed his fist on the podium. The wood cracked under his anger. They forgot the very dust that raised them. They forgot the blood of a mother. They traded their souls for comfort. Pointing toward the sky, the king's voice thundered. "Let this be known. When you climb high, when you drink from the river of success, you do not cut the rope that pulled you up." The drum hit its peak and fell silent. The crowd held its breath. "Children," the king's voice softened but cut like steel. "Remember your village. Remember your sacrifice. Remember your mother. Or you will live with empty hands and hollow hearts. And in that silence, the village felt it. This was no ordinary eulogy. It was a curse. The burial was simple, dignified, and heartbreaking. The entire village attended. The church choir sang my favorite hymns. The elders spoke of my strength. But 2 seats remained conspicuously empty. Jonathan and Bella did not come home for the burial. The Reverend, his heart heavy, simply told them, "Your mother needed your presence, not your money. The village has already taken care of her." The community buried me with dignity and love, the love my own successful children could not spare. I was laid to rest next to Andrew, under the shade of the mango tree of our old dreams. After the burial, Mrs. Elizabeth, while helping clear my simple belongings, found an old, worn exercise book tucked beneath my pillow. It was a letter, dated just a few days before I collapsed, never sent. It was addressed to Jonathan and Bella. It wasn't full of complaints, it was full of love. It read, "My darlings, my shining stars. I know you are busy, and I am so proud of your beautiful lives. Don't worry about me. I have the memory of your smiles, and that is enough to warm me. I just want you to remember one thing. The greatest success you will ever have is not the size of your house or the name of your company. It is the size of your heart, and your ability to remember who you were and where you started. Don't lose your humanity in the bright lights. Don't forget the meaning of home. I love you always, forever. Your Mummy." The lesson: always remember where you came from. Success is meaningless if it costs you your humanity. The roads may be rough, the electricity may be weak, but your roots are your strength. Never let a fancy job or a comfortable life make you too busy or too good for the people who sacrificed everything so you could have that comfort. Children, look after your mothers and fathers. Honor their sacrifice. Because the day you call, and their voice is not there to answer, is a sorrow that even all the wealth in the world can never fix. Thank you so much for watching this African tale. Tell me, where are you watching from? Please drop your thoughts in the comment section. I'd really love to hear from you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring African stories. And always remember, love, faith, and courage are the greatest treasures you can ever have. God bless you all. Bye.